Okay, I'm ready to cut my dados. Now, I'm not going to bore you with you sitting here watching me just keep shoving boards across a table saw. But again, what I want to do on this upper case, which is taller, I'm going to run this one, then I'm going to flip around so that I'm running shorter. In other words, I don't have as much, I don't want to try to run a big wide panel against the fence out here cutting over here. I'm too stretched out. So I'll show you very quickly. Now I've still got the other panel to cut, but obviously you can see, for me to cut this one, I'm going to have this one about here, so I'm going to be way over here trying to hold. It's kind of cumbersome. But if I turn this around and cut this one coming from this direction, then see, I'm not going to be that way. I'm not going to be stretched out. You know, so the distance from the fence, the shortest distance I can get from the fence to the blade is the way I want to run it. Okay, let me get these cut and we're going to come back. All right, guys, take a look. We got all our tops all dadoed, all of our cases dadoed, and they're ready. Now it's time to turn our focus to our shelf. Now I want to mention something. As soon as I move this storyboard, I'm going to take a blanket and cover this. When you got wide panels, if you just leave them lay out in the air, you'll see them cup. And the reason for that is that one surface, the exposed surface, will dry out a little bit. And when that happens, when wood dries, it shrinks. And so what happens is the top of this will start to shrink a little bit and it'll start to cup. And I don't want that, so I keep it covered or in a plastic bag. Now, I got an issue. Well, sort of, not really. My piece of MDF that I'm going to make my shelf pattern out of wasn't wide enough. Why? Well, that's simple. Remember when we were doing the layout, and the reason I'm showing you this, I don't want you freaking out if that runs into you, is that when we did our layout and we actually extended the face of the corner cabinet out a little bit, and I realize Crystal's telling me she's having a hard time getting you to see this, but you saw it when we were up high and did it. We extended the front of the shelf out because our 42 inches was from this point to this point. So, but remember, we actually came, and what we did is we extended out and then came down. It's that point where we extended it out that made my shelf pattern too narrow. So what I simply did was I just simply glued a piece on it so I can go for it. But I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing the way you glue a piece on a corner cabinet. See the caul in the back? It's about the only way you can get to the corners. So while this is drying, we're going to take a look. We got a term around here in the South called, I'm going to wet your whistle. I'm going to give you a little sample of what's coming. So we're going to go to the back and I'm going to let you see something. Come on. All right, guys, this is the wood we're going to be making the face out of. This is some instrument grade tiger maple. Yeah, I know. But I thought just for kicks, I'd slide it through the planer. Just a piece of it, just kind of let you take a look. It just came in, so let's take a look at what we're going to be doing. Now I'm going to turn my mic off because I don't want to blast your ears. That's right pretty, huh? That ought to make one that'll scream. All right, let's go back and get to that shelf. All right, guys, I think I've got this thing. I think this glue's dry enough, so we're going to roll on. The first thing I want to do is I want to get me one good 45-degree side. So I'm just going to take my straight edge here and I'm going to make me one. It's got a rounded end, that ain't working. Let me get my straight edge up here. And make sure the front of your shelf up here is straight. I just want to barely skim one side of this to get it dead on 45, and that looks good to me. Now I'm just using a good combination square just to get my line. All right. Now, since this is going to be a pattern, lost the screw, what can I say? Actually, because this bench has got the holes in it, sometimes that happens. They'll get drill bits, they'll get a lot of things. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we go into the table saw. All right, you saw this before when we were straight lining. Now with this pattern and with my fence, this makes me a pattern cutter. Now I could just as easily do this with a router bit, but this is just, we got a lot of shelves, so this is just all too quick and easy. That's sweet, ain't it? That's quick. Yeah, it does nice. But you see now why I was telling you the pattern that we want to leave them shelves a little longer in the corners so we got something to screw this to. All right, now let's go back and start fitting. Now I'm going to make this easier. I've got one side. Let me double check and just make sure that I am, well, I done lost my bearing surface. That's okay. It's 45. All right, I'm going to get a shelf. All right, I got a shelf blank here. And I'm going to set this up. Make sure I'm straight. And flush. And I'm going to mark it. Yeah, I know I forgot the pencil again. I do have a lot. Now all I'm going to do is go to the bandsaw and I'm going to whack this one side off. I'm just going to rough it and leave the line. Now I'm going to use the same pattern the same straight side to get my shelf. And I'm going to do some measuring and some calculating here, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, before I bandsaw this, I'm going to go ahead and get the pattern worked out, just so I can do it all one time. Here on the story, this squiggly line, that's going to be the face frame. Remember, we had to move it back to get a little bit more width for the door, for the glasses. From this point, which is the back of our shelf, to this point is 3 inches. From this point to the other side, a straight line across, which will be our widest point on, this will be the inside, is 42 3/8 inches. So here's what I did. And this is going to be hard to see because I'm on the nasty side of my piece of MDF. What I did is I went over here and I set my combination square to 3 inches. And when it lined up to this point and this point, I drew my 45, I drew my line. Now, let me show you that. Let me get around here, Chris. All I did was index off my 45-degree side. I set my combination square at 3 inches, and I just moved up until I was point to point, and I drew the line. Simple as that. Then what I did is I said, okay, at that point, this is now like 2 1/16 or something like that, down to this corner, straight down. I drew a line all the way across it. Out to my outer end. Then I measured from this point right here over 42 3/8 inches. Then all I had to do was take my 45 on my combination square and go to that point and draw my line. Now that will ultimately be our shelf right there, and then the 45 down. But what that also does, that also gives me the point on this side from where I have to cut this shelf to get my full pattern. So I've got to take this side off. We're going to do it the exact same way. Now this piece of MDF, I can just throw screws in it anywhere, anywhere I want. I'm going to scoot that back a little bit, or I'm going to put that screw right through that glue joint. All right. Pretty good. Looks good to me. All right, going to the table saw, just as we did, I'm going to cut it. Be right back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check myself and make sure that I'm lining up where I want to be. We're good. Okay. Now, if you notice, I've still got a lot here in the back, and I've got these corners. So that's my point, that on my shelf, I'll be using to screw it down to make my pattern. So I'm going to line back up here with the line I've already drawn. Ooh, that's cutting that close. Alright. Now the reason I'm just going to knock these off with a bandsaw. Could do it with the jigsaw, is just then we're going to go to the table saw and just cut the shelf out. Here we go. So I'm just going to pop these off real quick, leaving the line pretty kind of heavy. The main thing on this is make sure your front's nice and straight and flush. Alright, I'm not going to move the camera, but I'm going to leave it on just so you can listen. You'll see how long it takes to cut this. As you well know, not much. There we go. And we'll get these corners a little later. Don't worry about them right now. But we got the beginnings of a corner cabinet. I might be fitting the mic too good. Now you know, now I'm going to mention this, like I told you, I'll fit something that tight if I was going to be finishing the inside, because by the time I take a random orbit and stand the top and the bottom of that shelf, it's going to go in there. In this case, the 150 that we ran these panels through was the final cut. Well, the way I did these panels, I started with a 36, then I made a couple passes, then I went to an 80, a couple passes, and then I jumped to a 120, and then I gave it a final hit with a little bit of 150. Now, one of the things with a drum sanders are not going to give you a finish that you don't have to sand. But when you finish it out going with the grain at 150, it don't take a lot. You know, you still got to use your random orbits and sand them, but it doesn't take much to do it. But the other side to that is, and this is just a footnote, when we get into that tiger maple and curly cherry, man, that can be tough. We got the burns to contend. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with that and how to deal with that, let's see, this is October. We're just now putting out our October, November newsletter, and so it'd be October, November of 09 whenever you see this. So if you go back to the website and refer to that newsletter, there's a write-up on drum sanders, using them, how to use your sandpaper and deal with that and whatever. So, but, you know, just want a good fit. Okay, now what we got to do is we got to just keep on going. Now, again, I could just bore you to tears watching me just keep on cutting shelves. The only thing I'm going to do, though, is I am going to pull up one of the doubles, you know, and show you that. Hey, did y'all notice from the last episode that, look at this, there's still some scratches in it. I scraped and cleaned up the top of my bench, put a good coat of Waterlux on it. So it is getting kind of, y'all know what the word nasty means? It was nasty. So I was told. Now you notice I'm pulling these out. I had them over here covered up. All right. Now make sure you check these real good and make sure you don't have any clamp marks in the fronts, because you don't want that. You do just like we did the sides, just skim them a little bit, get them out. Smart thing to do is use some caws. Yeah, I know. I was in a hurry. All right. One shelf. One more shelf. I'll grab a, whoops. Oops, that's the word, not whoops, oops. I had a little Mexican boy work for me. He was legal. Tell you what, one of the best little woodworkers I ever seen in my life. And anyway, he moved away. I hate to see him go. But if something didn't go right, he'd come to me and he'd say, "Senor, I have a little oops." Sometimes I'll tell you one thing, though, I learned from him. Those guys' definition of little and ours, usually two different things, because when he told you he had a little oops, it usually wasn't real little. I'm going to tell you another quick story about him, too. In the summer, he'd shave his head. He completely took all the hair off. And in our big shop we used to have, he was down, and we had this whole big dining room table and hutch and all this chairs and everything was all made of walnut. And as you know, I used some dye on walnut. Well, he was using what's called a light walnut dye, and of course it's kind of dark brown or brown. And he was down there, and he had his gloves and everything on, but obviously he had gotten an itch. And I walked downstairs to check on him, see how he was doing. I laughed. He was down, he's got his mask on and them gloves, but obviously he took his hand, he went just like this on the top of his head to scratch it, and there's a perfect big handprint with dye right on top. He didn't have a clue. That was pretty funny. Don't do that. All right, I'm going to take a jigsaw these out, and just keep on going until I get all my 8 shelves. Okay? Then we'll come back and deal with the corners. All right. I was cruising along yesterday afternoon, finishing up my shelves. And I ran into one of them oopses. I guess I shouldn't have been making fun of Antonio. I'll show you what I did. I glued a couple boards too short. Remember when I was showing you I was gluing up and I said I cut one too short? Looks like maybe it wasn't just one. And I thought all night who I could blame it on. Nah, well. See what I did? I didn't glue long enough, and so I had a big corner in here, and you can see what I did. I took one of them corners off of the, when I bandsawed it out. You know, if you want to make a set of stair treads, that ought to give you a good idea how to do it. There you go. But anyway, so I took a corner and cut it and glued it in there. Call it a birthmark. I got a feeling there'll be maybe another 1 or 2 in here before we're done. What do you think? We'll just hide this one somewhere. Not a big deal. So in case you guys think I don't make mistakes, hang around. I'm good at them. You know, the only difference in professionals and hobby guys is that not that we don't make mistakes, it's just that we kind of know how to get out of them. Because we've made so many, we learn. And sometimes through all of that, you learn how to avoid them. All right, last shelf, straight line it. Then we're going to do the corners. Be right back. All right, time to cut the back. The actual width on this now is 18 1/4. Now I want to emphasize something. If you're building this corner cabinet and your dimensions vary a little bit from mine, that's fine, guys. Don't get yourself all worked up, you know. And, you know, don't. Now what I'm telling you, what I'm measuring is from the back of the shelf, what will be the back, to the front edge. Now remember, this area in here, that's going to be our face ring. So all I got to do now is set my fence at 18 1/4 and cut them. All right, I want to check something. Now, I'm going to show you this now, but when we get to doing this face frame, I'll really emphasize it. Excuse me. Is we want to make sure a little mock-up pattern that we're going to fit in here, and we're looking pretty good. And one of the things you have to be careful of in a corner cabinet is sometimes, you know, if you don't have your angle right, your face frame will try to stick out here a little bit. And when we actually get to sawing this, what's going to happen is that we'll actually be very careful. And, you know, 22.5 is that's what it's supposed to be. But if we got to fudge that angle just a little bit to make everything fit tight, we fudge the angle, don't sweat it. As long as this is coming up on its 45 and this is setting, you know, straight here and fitting our shelf, we're going to be fine. All right, I'm going to finish cutting the backs of the shelves, and next time we're going to trim our sides and put the carcass together. Now we have a new word. And I got a little blonde back here behind the camera, just chuckle. Crystal came up with a new term for these. These are not episodes. What are they, Crystal? Loud.
Webisodes.
Webisodes. So all white Wally, we're gonna do webisodes. Webisodes. So I'll see you next time on the next webisode.